The Madlanga Inquiry this week heard more jaw-dropping testimony detailing more allegations of corruption within the ranks of the SAPS. US President Donald Trump has also threatened military action against Nigeria over attacks on Christians. For more on these and other big stories of the past 7 days, we're joined by political analyst Dr Musa Mdunge, Africa-Asia Dialogues Director and Research Fellow Thembisa Fakude, and columnist Bhekisisa. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this evening as we round up the big stories of the week. We'll start, of course, with the parliamentary ad hoc committee, where we saw the Deputy Minister in the Police, Castle Matale, appearing there. Maybe let's just start with you, Fakude, with regards to just the significance of the Deputy Minister appearing there. I mean, during those proceedings, quite early on, the Action SA MP was saying that it really could be pointless to have the Deputy Minister come in. They were looking for the big fish that would come in and give some of the detail of what really is this infiltration. What did you make of his testimony at the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee? All right, Mr. Fakude, I think you'd need to unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. It was very disappointing and exposed the minister of the lack of work he's doing as the minister. Now there's a new discussion, and the discussion is about whether we need deputy ministers, and this is because of Mr. Matale's failure to explain precisely what he does as a deputy police minister. But at the same time, he also managed to throw the minister under the bus, like many others have done, in terms of the decision that he made on the 31st of December about disbanding the PT, I think it's called Political Task Team, or the Political Killing Task Team.
Yes.
That further exposed the minister of police, and he was thrown under the bus. And when he was pressed to answer this question, the deputy minister was at pains in terms of trying to find appropriate words that will first shield himself and at the same time protect his boss. But at the end, he had no choice but to actually admit that the decision was not informed, the decision was disturbing. So overall, two things that I've noticed so I can comment on. One is that his presentation was very disappointing. He had a lot of errors and not knowing precisely what to say. But the second most important one, of course, is that he managed to expose his boss. And his job is becoming more and more irrelevant. And hopefully many people, including President Cyril Ramaphosa, is listening, and you are likely to have these deputy ministries cancelled henceforth after what the deputy police minister said. Week.
Bhekisisa, you were very interested in particularly that point of the relevance of deputy ministers. I mean, you even penned an article with regards to the police minister saying that he was still acclimatizing to the job 12 months into it, and therefore both deputy ministers to this day have not been assigned any duties.
The Minister of Police, Mncube, is working on it. He's going to do it immediately, you know. And as we have learned in South Africa, immediately doesn't necessarily mean
immediately
it's going to happen at once. Well, I think what to make of the testimony, it was, on the whole, it was irrelevant. But it did give us an idea of the man that we thought we knew, Mncube, that you make such a decision, you don't even consult your deputies, and you don't assign your deputies any work. I've worked in government. Deputies are assigned some branches or units of the department, and those units, they are account to the deputy minister, who in turn reports to the minister on assigned duties. So routinely, that is what deputy ministers do on an everyday basis. It is unusual, rather, to have a deputy ministers to be more than one. Normally, that used to happen only with foreign affairs, which is now called international cooperation. And clearly, you can understand there you have about 194 countries under the were members of the United Nations. So theoretically, if you're running foreign affairs, you'll have to visit at some stage some of these countries. But in the police, there's no need for such. It's not even the biggest department to start with. And Castle hasn't acquainted himself very well with whatever that he watches. Whenever he attends management meetings with the police, you will have learned certain things, some insights. But when we are not consulted and you are treated as a visitor, it's always going to be difficult. So the position of Mncube is looking vulnerable with every testimony before the commission. I do not think he will survive this commission. Even before we have the cat from prison who might, to save his own skin, might put him under the bus.
Right. So, Dr. Mdunge, maybe let's just get your insights with regards to the Deputy Minister's testimony at the Parliamentary ad hoc committee. Do you think that maybe with his testimony we are seeing clearer lines of factions within SAPS?
Well, look, certainly this is politics and factions do abide. And in many ways, the fact that we are hearing from him, I know there's an argument that says he is not a big fish, but I would argue from a political level, he's very much so a big fish. But what it underscores here is, again, a state that simply is not functioning. We can all have, the questions around what is the role of deputy ministers and is this not wasted taxpayers' money? But it is interesting, nonetheless, to hear from the deputy minister as he lays out the inner workings of the state and brings all South Africans into a better understanding where they can then finally get the answers they need as to why is the issue of crime such a problem 30 years into democracy? Why can't we get this thing right? And clearly what we're getting from both the ad hoc committee and the Madlanga Commission is that perhaps the crime we see is intentional. In many ways, the same way we had those sort of summations with the state capture days, we are getting to that summation even now.
Sure. And that, of course, then takes us to Madlanga. I mean, we saw a number of witnesses once again jaw-dropping testimonies within this week. But I think what was also quite interesting, Thembisa, was when there was the talk on ballistics and just looking at the backlog and the shortage in skill, the shortage in human resource in order for us to be able to get through all of that data which sits within ballistics in order for crimes to be solved. That must be a cause for concern.
Indeed, it's a cause for concern, but it also exposes the minister, that the minister seemed to have been sleeping on the job. The fact that such an important function of the police services is not well staffed, is not well resourced, raises some very serious questions. And it was really troubling to be hearing that. The ballistic report on I think even it is the police sergeant who was presenting this was at pain. In fact, was almost in tears when he was presenting this about the lack of not only support but resources. But importantly, at the same time, it helped us to understand the processes that the police have to go through in terms of investigation. I was impressed with the knowledge that was presented by the police in terms of thoroughness, procedures, laws, and checks and balances, notwithstanding, of course, that they are under-resourced, but there are systems in place. That, for me, was a comfort, that at least we are a country that has got systems in place. We're a country of laws and we're a country that's guided by rules and regulations. And that for me was the plus. But of course, the concern is that notwithstanding all of the systems that are in place, we still need people who are fit for purpose and proper resources to ensure that this very important function of the police is executed.
Bhekisisa, your thoughts on the issue of ballistics? I mean, we saw there just some of those issues that were coming out, but with Thembisa saying that we do have systems in place? Is it just a matter of a shortage in skill and the right number of warm bodies sitting there and being able to go through all of that data in order for us to solve some of those crimes that we are seeing in the country?
Well, the issue of the understaffing in the ballistic unit of the police is another set indictment on Mncube. He was busy de-establishing political killings task team when the real problems in the police is actually the ballistic unit, which, as we know, there's a proliferation of firearms in this country. I follow the SAPS Facebook page. The number of firearms collected from suspects by the police every single day is just unbelievable. And we know that the majority of murders in this country, which we have the highest, comparable to countries of our size, are also committed using firearms. So if your ballistic unit is understaffed and you know this, and you do nothing about it. They try to hire the advertise, and the advert is withdrawn. They end up with one person instead of 9. And you think this is normal in a country that is under siege from the criminals? It's really looking every day. We are reminded again why we should not have people like Mncube, because it's not just about him as an individual. For now, we're talking about him. But there are systematic issues with our leaders, the aging population there in parliament, which concerns the population, because we're not getting, there's no return for investment that all South Africans pay with sweat and blood. But what we get, at the very least, we get a commission of inquiry. So maybe we should be thankful we have another commission of inquiry.
Well, maybe we should. I mean, with everything that is coming out of this commission of inquiry, maybe we've got some headway. We are making some headway. Before we wrap up the segment, Dr. Mdunge, maybe I just want to touch on the issue of firearms that Bhekisisa has just spoken of. And we heard within the Madlanga Commission about how we've seen a same number of drugs of arms being used interchangeably amongst different gangs in different provinces. Is it quite alarming that we are seeing that we are unable to curb something as basic as seeing that the same gun is being used over and over again, given the systems that we do have in the country?
Yes, certainly it is worrying. It speaks both to the country's intelligence, surveillance, and its ability to be able to really get ahead of where the networks that are supporting the movement of illegal firearms. And it is important that we get a nip on that. But also, Katlego must remember that if you just think about South Africa's private security system, is perhaps far larger than the police and far more powerful. And so in the private security space, we already know that we are dealing with a space that is quite advanced in the kind of weaponry that it holds. And I think for a country, we ought to raise questions even about that. Could our police stand stack to stack with even the private security? So many of us, right, are already have turned towards paying monthly installments for private security because of the failures of the state to provide what is a constitutional right. So certainly it is a concern, and one that if we don't get ahead of it, will then undermine our ability to deal with violent crime in our country wherever it raises its head.
All right, gentlemen, let's just go for a quick ad break. We'll be back with more. We are taking a look at the top stories of the week, so do stay with us. Welcome back. We are discussing the stories that dominated the headlines in this past week. And with me, I'm joined by political analyst Dr. Musa Mdunge, Africa-Asia Dialogues Director and Research Fellow Thembisa Fakude, and columnist Bhekisisa Mncube. You can also participate in these discussions. You can send us a WhatsApp on 072-110-5584 or give us a call on 010-594-6010. You can also engage with us on X at Newsroom 405. Okay, gentlemen, so let's continue just a little bit on the Madlanga Commission, because so much had come out of those discussions in this past week. We heard from Witness C, who returned to the Commission to give more of his testimony, and he spoke of quite a number of interesting factors, and the first being that when they were chasing Kat Madlala before his arrest, he claimed to be coming from the former police commissioner's house, Ria Pierre. Bhekisisa, what did you make of that allegation?
I think Kat is just being Kat. Really, so many claims, so much of name dropping. I'm beginning to question his state of mind, actually. And it doesn't help that Ria Pierre issued a statement that was riddled with errors, confusing the dates, confusing the gender of Kat Madlala, calling him a her. We're like, is this a movie? Are we living in this country? Is this for real? I mean, the recording that was played at the commission from Kat Madlala, the claims that he made, if half of it were true, we will really and truly be living in a mafia state. If half of it, I'm not talking about the whole of it, just half of it, if it was true. And it's quite scary to tell you the truth. But who is going to come out worse in this situation? Some individuals obviously will be sacrificed and end up in jail. But the person who is on trial here is the African National Congress. I was speaking to some senior journalists and saying, do people even know that General Sibiya is not a card-carrying member of the ANC? She said to me, of course they don't. Everybody who is in a high position in this country is assumed to be ANC, even if they're not. So the ANC is on trial, and they don't have a defense. Nothing, absolutely nothing. They're coming out west, and the elections are just around the corner. And this commission, I can tell you now, will still be running next year.
Thembisa, I mean, Bhekisisa speaks about the ANC being on trial, and we are hearing, I mean, as this Kat Madlala character, speaking of the big names that he's associated with, this alleged proximity of people who are in power to people who are of the nature of Kat Madlala, in him being an alleged kingpin. What does this do to the perception, like he says, of the party that now seemingly would be on trial?
Well, I do agree with Bhekisisa. The ANC is on trial here. The ANC has tended, I mean, obviously, most senior positions in this country are held by ANC members or those that support the ANC. We've seen the irresponsible, for example, deployment of diplomats, those that have failed or are seen to be possible competition to politics, or those with political ambitions in this country are often deployed. That in itself is a problem. So I totally agree that the ANC is on trial here. I mean, if you listened to the testimony of Bhekisisa, confidently and comfortably saying that he takes freebies from criminals, that was problematic, and nobody condemned it simply because it was this macho, articulate Bhekisisa who could say it. Even the media, by the way, failed to actually take him on. That how can you even say such a thing? And he came up with some long explanation on how he deals with these criminals. And now that he's a pensioner, he's basically entitled to take freebies from pensioners. And again, this is a very senior member of the ANC. Not only was he not, I mean, pardon me, he was not very articulate. He made a lot of mistakes grammatically, which made many of us to cringe while listening to him. And this was the man who was supposed to be a number one in the police force. He went on to take freebies from the criminals. And this week we're hearing more other stories of incompetency. But again, at the end of the day, I totally agree that the ANC is on trial here. But and also the top cop, which is Mr. Senzo Mkhunu, is on trial here. And I don't see him, as my colleagues have said, surviving this fiasco that we are all experiencing and watching at the moment.
Dr. Mdunge, I mean, we're speaking of a fiasco that's unfolding in front of us at the moment. And the Shepherd Bushiri, who his not yet being extradited back to South Africa, is also claiming that Sibiya had said if he had made payments to him, he would make his case go away. Does this seem like the infiltration and the rot certainly is far-reaching in this country?
Certainly so. It definitely seems to have a reach beyond the borders, and it certainly shaped this particular matter. We've recently seen the recent Malawi High Court judgment that has overturned the lower court judgment that would have authorized Bushiri's extradition. And the point that the court makes quite plain is that the proceedings were tainted by bad faith, political motivation, and oppressive delay. That's very interesting. And so when we see what's happening in the Madlanga Commission, the ad-hoc commission, all of it then paints a broader picture and has impact here. And now Bushiri is benefiting from that because all of a sudden, either the South African government has got to then appeal this particular judgment or just take the L. But at this point, it is likely that they will appeal this judgment. But whether it will work to the favor of the South African government, time will tell. But it is very interesting in terms of the impact that this has on cross-border relations as it pertains to of course, the extradition of interesting people to both the South African criminal justice system as well as Malawi, if ever the case should be made for someone to be extradited there. So it does raise interesting questions about the future of such relations.
So, Bhekisisa, just to close off the issue on the Madlanga Commission, the ANC-SG has now made a call for arrests to start being made, despite the party saying that they should wait for the Madlanga Commission to end in order for there to be decisions to be made. Is there a disconnect or a discord between what we've been hearing from the party and now what the SG has put forward?
I don't even bother myself anymore listening to Phil and Balul. I mean, guys, let us be serious now. You see, they destroyed the NPA, they destroyed the Scorpions, they destroyed the SAPC, they destroyed Transnet, they destroyed PRASA for only one reason, to extract rent so that they can live these beautiful lives with these expensive cars and homes and plots, empty plots here and there, houses in Zimbabwe. They are not interested in governance. Absolutely nothing. So we just, it's not about taking it with a pinch of salt. No, we must not pay any attention to anybody in the ANC who talks about justice. We would have done that perhaps before the Zuma moment. And then I thought for many years, it was Zuma destroyed this, Zuma did this, Zuma did this. And I believed the story because there was 9 lost years, we were told. Actually, it turns out that there is a pattern, and the pattern goes beyond Zuma. After Zuma, we had the PPE scandal, we had CR17, we had Palapala, where, it does not matter who is in charge of the ANC. Everyone will tell us about rebuilding. How do you rebuild something that you destroyed? It served the ANC very well to have a weakened NPA. H. Makashule was arrested. I was still, I didn't have any gray hair at the time. And I'm now about to go on pension. He's still not in orange overalls. And he was a sacrificial lamb anyway. And so many other figures in the ANC. Vincent, what's his name? He was arrested for Posasa. Other Posasa beneficiaries are sitting pretty there by Lutuli House and others in cabinet. Nobody says a word about them. So nothing is going to happen. The only reason something is going to happen with this current commission is because of one man and one man only. Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. That is our hero. That is the guy who put his job, his reputation on the line to save this country. So because he is investigating as we speak, there is going to be fireworks. But don't expect that to come from Luthuli House. There can't be fireworks from Luthuli House. That thing is long past its sell-by date. When we have 40% in the country already, and you're still behaving the way they are behaving as if nothing has ever changed. Nothing happened a year ago, as far as the ANC is concerned. It's business as usual. That is the same attitude that is going to consign them to become our former rulers. Maybe South Africa will be better off in any event.
But I mean, at the moment, they're talking about renewal within the party. They're talking about how the service delivery in the municipalities is making a turnaround because of some of the strides that they've made. Do you disagree with that?
There's no renewal in the ANC. I was in the ANC for hundreds of years and monitored the ANC, wrote about the ANC all my career as a journalist and as a columnist. I understand it back to back, and I keep hoping and hoping when a new guy comes in, I'll read everything about them, and then they would say all the right things, and then you wait for the results. You'll never see those results.
All right, Bhekisisa, let's hold it there. Let's hold it there. We just need to take a quick ad break, but thank you for giving us those contributions. We are still continuing with our discussion, with rounding up the big stories of the week. Do stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back. You're watching the late edition, and we're recapping your top stories from this past week with our panel of experts. So, Dr. Musa Mdunge, we are looking at now the GPU within the province of KwaZulu-Natal, and the National Freedom Party has made an ultimatum to the IFP to recall the Premier, which is Thami Nduli, and amongst other things that they've put forward. Do you think that it's well within the NFP as a kingmaker to make these ultimatums?
Well, certainly. I mean, if they're looking at the numbers, then they do have an argument that they can make, particularly given the fact that, President Jacob Zuma's, or former President Jacob Zuma's MK party, of course, got the bulk of the votes there and is sitting on the heel of this coalition. And it would be very interesting to see, given how badly the ANC did, whether they too would be itching to ditch the IFP at this moment. But of course, everything in the government of provincial unity would have implications on the national unity issue, and there's implications from that end. But certainly the points that they raise in terms of conversations around how spending in terms of the province is happening, particularly the controversial issue of a pension fund for traditional leaders, Amakosi, is raising huge questions in that province, given the challenges that it has. So it will be very interesting to see whether the IFP, the ANC, can come together in order to sweet-talk the NFP into staying. But at this point, this is a very unstable government, and it raises questions about the future stability of this government of provincial unity.
Thembisa, what do you think would be the implications of governance in that province should the NFP pull out?
Well, first of all, I think there's been some horse trading. You are likely to have the ANC and IFP supporting each other and saving the skin of the Premier of the province, because we are hearing that there might be some reshuffling. In other words, giving ANC some significant positions within the government of provincial unity. But again, this is political expediency. They don't care about the voters. They don't care about the people they purport to be leading. It's all about saving political careers and saving certain positions within that government of provincial unity. But again, if it collapses, it's the people of the province who are going to suffer. And that's the biggest concern. And again, it speaks to this criticism that I have of these political parties in KZN, that they really do not care about the voters. They only care about themselves. And this also applies in the municipalities, not only in KZN, but in Johannesburg. They are willing to collapse municipalities and change mayors as they wish because of political expediency. They just simply do not care about the mandate that they got in terms of continuing to improve the lives of the people, particularly in KZN, where there are serious structural challenges and problems. And what you're going to be having, or what we have been having for the past couple of days, is the talk of a collapse of a government of provincial unity, which again dents and threatens confidence, particularly the provincial investment confidence, as many people are looking at going to KZN. We've been hearing about the attractiveness of that province. But with these kind of talks, that's going to impact on the KZN and eventually is going to trickle down and impact on our people.
So, Thembisa, maybe just looking a little further afield, President Samia Suluhu saw a landslide victory in the elections in Tanzania. Of course, Chadema, which is the opposition party, was barred from those elections. What did you make of the situation in Tanzania?
Extremely disappointing. And it's a joke. Who gets a 97%? This is a president who was jailed, continued to torture. In fact, many people in Tanzania are calling these ceremonial elections. They were not really a competition, no presidential elections. She has jailed many of his of the potential competitors in these elections, many of whom have self-exiled because of fearing of being jailed. And you had the internet that's been shut down throughout the electoral period, and including during the elections. So it's very disappointing, particularly coming from a woman who are in short supply in Africa and the world in terms of leadership. Now you have this dictator who's following the footsteps of the Yoweri Musevenis of the region and the Paul Kagames of the region. So it was quite disappointing. And Tanzania will never be the same. And her tenure as the president of Tanzania will never gain the respect that previously or the previous president deserved. She is now known as the one who jails and, oppresses her own people, and a dictator that deserves to be toppled like many others have been toppled. She's joined, as I said, the league of the Yoweri Musevenis and the Paul Kagames of the region, unfortunately. So, yeah, I was extremely disappointed with what happened during the period leading to elections and during the elections. And again, we don't hear anything from SADC nor AU, or South Africa for that matter, in terms of condemning the atrocities and injustice and the elections that were not free and fair in that part of the world.
And Dr. Mdunge, what is your take on these elections? I mean, and I specifically wanted to ask, particularly with what Thembisa is referring to, just that characterization of a dictator, particularly in a woman. Should we even compare it because she's a woman? But most certainly this painting a picture of African leaders now taking this trajectory in order to retain power.
Well, in this particular context, we actually should park her gender aside here, because if we go back to the 2020 elections in October, they really were the foundation of the current pattern. At the time, the election of, the then late President John Magufuli was also deemed on very much the same lines, where he won overwhelmingly with 84% of the vote. But in many ways, those elections were deemed as Tanzania's return to de facto one-party rule, because for the first time, unlike in previous elections, where opposition parties were more welcome, were making gains, in that election, main opposition parties were also barred from standing. So in many ways, this is just continuation of a previous pattern. The difference now is that it is happening under this leader, whom it is a groundbreaking moment where in Africa, we do have a shortage of female leaders. But it is disappointing that under this particular leader, that the tone that is being set is one where democracy is certainly regressing, and authoritarian rule has been consolidated in this particular election. But also, Katleho, is the issue of what it does to regional economic stability. Because Kenya, for example, given the conflict near the border, has had to shut down that border, stop cross-border trade between the two countries, impacting on the economic stability in that region. And so there's more that needs to be done. And I think quite correctly, as the other guest said, that South Africa needs to respond, because there's quite a lot happening in East Africa that if we don't focus on, I think as a continent, as we try to build intra-Africa trade, we're going to get stuck if we don't deal with such issues.
All right, gentlemen, we have come to the end of this discussion. Thank you so much for all of your inputs and insights. We certainly did enjoy. Thank you so much. We had Dr. Musa Mdunge, the political analyst, as well as Africa-Asia Dialogues Director and Research Fellow, Thembisa Fakude, and columnist Bhekisisa.